All right, we are back, and I am going to start with part 2 of the first lecture. This is about the human resources structure and pattern. Again, we're still learning this technology, so bear with me. I will get better at this as we go along. So the human resources, human relations structure evolved out of a lot of work and studies that happened in the mid-20th century. One of the biggest classic studies was the Hawthorne plant studies. This was out of Illinois, and it was done ostensibly because, again, we're talking about the classical structure, right? They wanted to improve production, improve efficiency, so they were studying ways that they could do that. So they looked at 4 things. They looked at working conditions, things like lighting, believe it or not, or the atmosphere in the room. They looked at financial rewards, of course. And one of the things is, as they were doing these studies, they found things that were counterintuitive to the classical structure. For example, they found that workers working overtime, even though they made more money, were less satisfied with their work. And that led them to look at the social and emotional needs of the workers, what would make workers more satisfied with their workplace, which led them to also look at the style of management. All of those things that were done in these long, extensive studies were laying the groundwork for this new approach, right, which was the human relations, human resources approach. We talk about human relations, human resources, because it was called human relations first, and then it evolved into human resources over the latter part of the 20th century. The other thing that came into play here, and most of you should be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which also came about in this same time period, which recognized that people have a pyramid of needs. And I have my pyramid upside down, if you will, here, where your physiological needs dominate, and as long as you are hungry, for example, or cold, you can't think about higher level needs. Then your safety needs come next, and then your affiliation needs come next, which is very important in terms of then leading you to feel good about yourself and your interactions in the external world. Now, I'm giving you just a very rough idea of this, but Maslow's hierarchy of needs has been used in psychology. It's been used, I use it in public relations, in understanding public relations and how you motivate people. It's been used in persuasion. But you can see that also in the workplace, they began to realize that the workers were not robots, and they needed to be considered in order for them to be not only productive, but to retain them and keep them. And that led to a whole series of theories referred to as theories X, Y, and Z. McGregor's theories X and Y and Uchi's theory Z. I think you'll talk more about these in the organizational theory class. I just want to point out here that all of these theories helped develop a broader understanding of the way an organization should be structured, which became the human relations, human resource structure. So what is that human relations, human resource structure style? The style is, and the acknowledgement is that the workers, they want to feel good about the work they do, right? On a daily basis, they want to feel good about coming into work. And these things are obviously self-evident for us as we know of our work experience, right? Workers want to see where they fit into the greater scheme of things and feel as if they're part of a team. Part of a team, that becomes very, very important. And HR, human resources, becomes a collaborative approach between management and employees rather than supervisors issuing the commands and assuming they're followed. So you move from the rule book being given to you, right, to being part of a team from the moment you are hired. So if we had to summarize that, we have that a happy employee is a productive employee, rather than the previous, a managed employee is a productive employee. So you can see how this has evolved and changed. I just want to put this up and it's not, I'm not going to go over it in great detail, but this is from Catherine Miller's book, An Organizational Communication. But it shows you how the classical theory of organizations evolves into what they call the neoclassical theory, which is really the basis of a human resources approach, right? And I just want to point out one or two things. One is, number two here, is that its main focus is on work and economic requirement of workers, right? That is efficiency and being productive, versus its main focus is on small groups and on emotional and human qualities of employees. That was a huge change. And the second one was, it emphasizes on order and rationality. Rather, it emphasizes on personal security and social requirement of workers while obtaining the objectives of the organization. So you're going to obtain the obtain the objectives of the organization by what we call caring for your workers. So we have what we call a caring HR management. And by the way, I will send you these PowerPoints, or I will put them in a place where you guys can access them so you can look at them yourselves. So what is a caring HR management? These again will seem very familiar to you, right? It offers development opportunities, both professional and personal, right? This is where you start having counseling centers. This is where you get time off for maternity leave. This is where you have professional development trainings, right? It provides and celebrates work opportunities. So now you're going to recognize employees for their contributions. You're going to have staff appreciation days, right? You're going to share results with employees. So now employers are going to be notified and informed about what's going on in the organization in a very different way from the classical approach, which was basically an announcement or a rule book. Now you're sharing and engaging with the employees about the goals of the organization. And to do that, you have to have shared missions and purpose and vision with employees. So you have a lot, and this is again where I think organizational development came in, right? You have to have a lot of meetings to talk about and engage in what the common vision is. And finally, that you conduct what we call onboarding and the exit interviews, right? So when you bring people in and when they leave, you conduct them and gather data so you can increase your retention of employees, both learning what you've done wrong at the end and at the beginning learning what the new employees are looking for. And this is really important, this last one, when we move to the third style of the cultural style, because I think it was these onboarding and exit interviews that began to adjust the workplace for a new style of worker. All right, so in the HR approach, what do we have? We have the content of the communication we know will be task and social, right? Lots more social. Formal opportunities for social, both in listening to employees and recognizing employees and sharing successes with employees, and some innovation. And I say some innovation because ostensibly you are listening to employees and asking employees to help you innovate. But as I will show you, I think in the HR model, that is not always taken seriously, and the contributions of the employees don't always change the organization. Secondly, the flow of the communication. Now we're going vertical and horizontal. And again, I'm going to talk about that in my example in just a minute and what that really means. But you're talking across different departments, and you're talking upward and downward in a far more complex way. And then the channel of the communication has moved, right, to more face-to-face. We have groups and teams. We have still written communication, obviously, but you're finding more and more requirements for face-to-face communication. Finally, the style is an informal style. Now, again, it's informal because of the way you're having meetings held. It might be more informal in terms of dress code. Even the style of the address in email, right? The way you address the community, dear community, hi guys, you know, they're all that stuff that happens. It's much more informal. I remember the vice president at Sonoma State used to say, take care, at the end of his emails. Okay, so let's talk about Sonoma State for a second, just to kind of show you the complexity of how communication intertwines with this human resource model. I was at Sonoma State from 1990 to 2016. I know that ages me. But at the same time, there was a big transition that happened. A new president came on board and a new associate vice president for administration and finance who became a key figure all across this time. And what existed before then was a far more classical structure of the university. Now, all of a sudden, there are big changes, and I've just highlighted a couple of them. There was the beginning of quality circles. This is on the administration side, where people were brought together as teams, not just within their departments, but for university-wide initiatives or department-wide initiatives. So a quality circle, don't you love the name, right, implies input from everybody equally. You had campus-wide committees that formed across the various administrative divisions. You held open forums, and again, these words were key, open forums for big issues. This was a time of a lot of budget crisis, and open forums were a way to have the employees react to and share their feelings about the budget crisis, as well as providing them with information. And you have email suddenly becoming the primary way you have very much an exchange of information other than the meetings. And so email, right, created accessibility across these divisions and also across the levels of management. And then finally, you have this interesting things, and this came out of the CSU. And you guys, this will sound familiar to you guys, but it still bothers me a little bit. Instead of hiring, you had talent acquisition, right? And instead of orientation, you have onboarding. And what's interesting, again, is if you think about the difference in those words from the classical approach, when I talked to you about the classical approach of hiring being employee selection, now it's about acquiring talent. So acquiring something that someone brings, not fitting necessarily into what already exists, and rather than orienting them, right, to the way that work is done, now they are onboarding, right, bringing on board, right, a new talent. I always found that very interesting. So I want you just to see, I'm going to escape out of here for just a second and come over here, and I want you to see this. This is the website at Sonoma State under Human Resources for all the information for training and supporting and development. And again, I will send you these links so you can look at them yourself. CSU Learn is actually available when you click into your SSU. But this is, what I want you to see is the number of types of training and development that is supported by the CSU in Sonoma State. It's almost too much, and I'll talk about why I think that is later. But you have a professional development, over 75,000 online lessons that people can have. You have continuing education support, system-wide professional development in all sorts of different areas. And you also highlight, here you can see CSU's Got Talent, right? You highlight your employees that are doing well. In addition to this, you have Sonoma State staff newsletters and videos. You have Staff Appreciation Day. You have staff awards. So you have a whole program of making staff feel recognized. All right. So you have this richness. Here is Sonoma State's structure, and this you can later look at my PowerPoint. But what I want you to notice here is you have the different divisions. You have from the left auxiliaries to academic affairs to administration and finance to student affairs to university affairs to university development. And without going into a lot of detail, the point I want to make is in the human resource model and the quality circles, if you will, what began to occur, for example, were quality circles would be meetings up and down within administration and finance. And then there were also university-wide committees that met that should include people from sort of all across these divisions. But what actually happened is that you often had university-wide committees that had one or two people from one or two spots across here communicating with each other, but not necessarily going back and communicating within their division. Or what you would have is a formal kind of open forum meeting, right? Meanwhile, in each division, you had more information being shared separately from across the universities. Just to show you another example, here is the academic side of the house. And just so you can see from President Sakaki down through the provost. And then what you see here is on one side you have all the schools, and on the other side you have the administration for academic affairs, all the people that orientation and all the people that have the registrar and deal with the faculty, deal with research. And right away you see something, what I call silos, right? In that the way it is structured, and it's not just on this page, but it also is the communication flow, is you have two silos, even within academic affairs. The schools are a silo, and the administration is a silo. And what happens is that means the communication, remember I said the communication was vertical, right? It can go up and down on one silo and up and down on another silo. The provost has meetings on this side, and the provost has meetings on this side, but the two don't combine. Now, when I first started, we would have meetings where the two would be combined. And as soon as the next provost came along, he very quickly separated them out because he did not like that cross-fertilization that was occurring. So your flow of communication, right, is dictated in some ways by the structures of communication that you are allowed. So your face-to-face communication, if you're in one part of the building and the provost is in another, the information, the horizontal communication that might go on is going to be very, very different. So what this led to at Sonoma State, and I don't mean to be completely negative here, I believe there's a lot of positive in the organization. I'm just trying to show you the complexity that the human resource model presents in terms of truly creating an environment where the employees are heard and participate. Right, so as I just said, the silo issue that I just went through means that the patterns of formal communication and informal communication can often bang up against each other and leave gaps. And what it can cause information to become siloed into divisions and not shared across divisions, right? Certainly not formally, because the formal communications tended to be within the silos, and the informal communication, right, that went across tended to be more of the frustration that people felt because they didn't know what was going on. So the flow of information in a huge organization like this, when you create these silos, can be a real challenge. The second thing that happens is the HR department can oftentimes become the manager, as I call it, of communication, and in that sense codify care. Now, we went through what care management was, right? And then I showed you all of the development opportunities that are out there. The problem with that is it begins to feel like you're being managed. It begins to feel like, just like in the classical, there's a rule book. It's almost like there's a rule book for recognizing and awarding employees, for helping employees professionally develop. That it can, the CSU especially, can over-control this kind of care management. I think that sometimes, for example, we talk about both the onboarding and the exit interviews. I used to argue for a very flexible format for those interviews, and HR wanted it to be almost like a survey, right? Because they wanted to be able to quantify the information. And then I think there's also a difficult piece of this, which I call manipulation of the employee involvement. you can sit on any number of committees, and on those committees you can speak up and make suggestions, but that doesn't necessarily mean the change occurs. And I could remember many, many times when a committee was making clear that they believed that the way something should happen with staff, right, was a particular way, and then after the committee meeting, nothing changed. So what happens is, while you have the social informal communication happening, you don't have the employee really being listened to for innovation and change. I'm sure that's something you talk about a lot on organizational development in terms of when you're trying to come in and make change. And finally, I think it's important to realize that this human resources structure, as we call it, doesn't always equal human resource communication. It goes back to what I said about the classical structure coming in and beginning to emerge through some of these other structures. So you can have this human resource structure that values employees and says it values employees, but then oftentimes by looking at the communication flow again and the style and the channels that are used, you begin to see that classical communication pattern that you know is holding things back. All right, I'm going to stop here again and take a quick break, and then we'll go on to the cultural style.